Reality Bytes.
Welcome to Reality Bytes Radio on the 22nd of December 2014. We have Brandon Turbeville with us again. Welcome to the show again, Brandon.
Hey Neil, thanks for having me on.
Not a problem. There's so much to talk about. I suppose we'll start off with Australia and the supposed ISIS, Islamic militant siege that took place in a coffee shop just right out of the blue. And this has, of course, been followed by a guy in France running people over in the car under the same kind of motivation, apparently. And all this is going to lead to more laws, and you've got an article which we're going to discuss in a minute on that as well. But firstly, you posted an article on the 18th of December. Sydney siege aftermath. Australian government seeks. Oh, sorry, I'm at the wrong one. I'm too far up the page. Apologies. 5 reasons to question the official story of the Sydney siege. And you posted that on December 15th on Activist Post. I read through this. This mainly involves this character, Man Harun Monis, and he's claiming to be an Ayatollah and all this kind of stuff. And the local Muslim community saying they know nothing about this guy and who is he? Do you want to take us through this?
Yeah. Now, as you said, I got 5 points in the article, and one of them is I found out some more information after I wrote it. And basically, this guy, Man Harun Monis, he also went by the name Mantegi Borojurdi. Right? This was another alias that he went by, and I actually think he had a third alias, but I don't recall that one. What's interesting about Monis is that he was supposed to have come from Iran, and he was, according to the recent reports, of course, he's this radical sheikh. He's the hate sheikh, and he's preaching all of this radical fundamentalist Islam. Now, point one was that I had in my article was that Monis was a Shiite, not a Sunni. And of course, what I actually found out a couple of days after that was that Monis had allegedly converted to Sunni Islam. And for a lot of people might be listening to that and say, "Oh, it's all Islam. We're just splitting hairs here in terms of ideology." That's not entirely true at all. I mean, Shiite and Sunni, it's a minor split, but these two don't generally mix, right? You don't usually convert, to be honest, from Sunni to Shiite, but it all goes back to the idea of who is the rightful head of Islam, and one branch says that it has to be the actual genealogy of or ancestry of the Prophet Muhammad, and the other says no, that you pick your leader as kind of like the Tibetans do, as the leader arises. So this is a pretty big split, and of course that's what you get in the Middle East. Is you've got a lot of conflict between the Shiites and the Sunnis, stirred up a lot by the West, of course. But this guy was supposedly a Shiite, right? He goes into a coffee shop and demands an ISIS flag. Well, ISIS is Sunni, right? So there's a pretty big difference between the two. But of course, the reports are now coming out and saying that he had converted to Sunni Islam. Okay, well, whatever. But beyond the recent media reports, I'm not really sure what evidence there is to say that he had become a Sunni, but there are reports out there saying that he had become a Sunni. The other question, though, is his history. All right, not just whether Shiite versus Sunni, but the question of whether he's a liberal Muslim or a fundamentalist Muslim. And this should be clear, right? If they're calling him the hate sheikh, if he's the fundamentalist guy who killed his wife, then he's obviously the fundamentalist Muslim. But funny enough, the guy had done interviews in Western media outlets for some time. In fact, he had done an interview with the Australian ABC network, where he stated that Australia, Canada, England, U.S., basically the West, are a paradise. He says that they're a religious society. The countries in the Middle East that say they're Islamic aren't really religious societies, but the West is a religious society, and we love the West. It's not a perfect society, but it's paradise. And he used those words. He said it was heaven, actually. So for somebody who has so much hatred for the West, he seemed to be quite pleased with it not too long ago in an interview on mainstream media. And the reason, allegedly, that he was being interviewed in the mainstream media was because he was claiming that his family back in Iran was in danger. The Iranians had captured or held his wife and children prisoner because of his own rhetoric, and his rhetoric was pro-Western rhetoric. It was liberal Islam. In fact, some of the Western media outlets that had interviewed him made it a point to point out that the reason his family was being held captive in Iran was because he was being too liberal for the Iranians. And so this shows us that he also served the purpose of anti-Iranian rhetoric. Now, I'm not by any means saying that Iran is not a dictatorship or that it's not a fundamentalist, oppressive religious society. It is. It perhaps isn't quite what the mainstream Western press would paint it to be, certainly not on the international stage, but it definitely is an oppressive society, a religious dictatorship, and so forth. But this guy is here in the West promoting anti-Iranian propaganda, right? He's talking about how he has fears that he would be executed if he ever returned to Iran. He claims that his family's in grave danger. All of this stuff comes out of his mouth. And he also mentions in some of these interviews that he had been involved with the Ministry of Intelligence and Security in Iran, and that he had been in contact after he left Iran with the United Nations regarding what he calls security issues in Iran. And he says that people close to Kofi Annan were looking to get involved and help solve these problems. So he's so concerned about his wife, and he's so concerned about his family. He's a family man, but yet he was arrested and facing charges on accessory before and after the fact to the murder of his wife, Nolene Hassan Powell. She was 30 years old, and she was stabbed to death and then set on fire outside of Sydney in April, outside of an apartment in Sydney in April. So a lot of these, the guy's a walking contradiction, right? And you also said earlier the question of his reputation in the Islamic community in Australia. After he was, he had given all these interviews and so forth back in 2008, a lot of the Islamic leaders in the Sydney area, the Australian area, came out and said that they had no idea who this guy was. He's proclaiming himself to be a sheikh and a leader, but they don't know who he is. They don't know his qualifications. He's not a Shiite spiritual leader at all, according to them. And they actually asked the federal services, the federal investigation services, to investigate Monis because they didn't trust him and they thought that he could be working for somebody else. So again, so just to kind of recap that, there are questions related to his actual brand of Islam. Is he Shiite? Is he Sunni? Did he convert? We don't know, really, for sure. Is he a liberal Muslim, that he's so liberal that he gets himself into trouble with the Iranian authorities? Or is he a fundamentalist Muslim, the kind that could kill his wife and the kind that could promote hate? In fact, he got the name the Hate Sheikh when he was sending hateful letters to the family members of dead Australian soldiers who had died in the Middle East. He was sending them letters, and it was filled with all kinds of nasty things. And he was actually convicted of that in Australia. So is he a fundamentalist Muslim or is he a liberal Muslim? And of course, the idea, his entire past in terms of the interviews and stuff that he did and the propaganda that he did for some time was anti-Iran propaganda, serving which of course would serve the benefit of the West. It would serve the benefit of the British, the Americans, the NATO alliance, essentially, that is unifying against Iran. And then, of course, we have questions of, his concern for his family, but then the ability to be an accessory to the murder of this woman. And of course, the fact that the Shiite clerics didn't trust the guy, didn't really know who he was, and wanted him investigated. These are all reasons, I think, that we should really question this narrative of Monas and the Sydney siege and the narrative that we've been given regarding it.
Yeah, well, I mean, certainly one of the contradictions there again is that in Iran he claims to have been working with the Ministry of Intelligence and Security. That doesn't sound like somebody who's going to criticise the regime when you're working for those guys. And as you say, his wife, I mean, it was a brutal murder, excessive before and after the fact. The woman was stabbed 18 times and set alight. Now, I mean, if they've got strong suspicions that this guy was complicit, at least, in this, or if not guilty, why was he walking about the streets in the first place? Who bailed him?
Yeah, exactly. Who bailed him out? And again, as you said, the idea here is that Australia is now pushing more anti-terror laws. I mean, you only had to wait 5 minutes to hear those reports coming out, but no anti-terror laws would have made a difference, right? Because the police already knew who he was. I mean, he'd been convicted on the letter sending a while back, so that would have told them that he was a fundamentalist. He had been convicted on a number of other charges, I believe, as well. And then, of course, he was on the radar of the police when he committed or was charged with this murder. So he was on the radar of the intelligence services and on the radar of even the local police. So to claim that all this really came out of the blue and that the law enforcement community didn't know who he was or didn't know that he was capable of some of these things, well, I mean, that's kind of hard to believe.
Well, of course, we spoke the last time about gun confiscation in, was it Boston? I can't remember. But we spoke about gun confiscation anyway, and Australia has some of the strictest gun laws in the Western world. And here we have a guy can walk into a cafe with some guns in his pocket and start shooting people. I mean, no gun confiscation whatsoever would have stopped this either.
Yeah, you could see how well it worked, right? The guy got a shotgun and he went into a cafe and blew people away. I think it was a shotgun that he was allegedly used, right?
Yeah, and of course, I mean, if people had been armed in that cafe, I mean, you can't fire that many shots out of a shotgun. Somebody would have taken them out.
I also wonder how he got a shotgun into a cafe. Did he just walk down the street? Did he have a trench coat to hide it in? I mean, these are questions that I'd like to see the answer to as well. I mean, in Australia, you don't just generally pick up a shotgun and walk down the street of Sydney.
Well, but I believe it's summertime down there as well. I mean, you wouldn't be walking about in a trench coat either.
Yeah, exactly.
It's pretty hot down there.
So was it already in the building? That's another question. It's all these things simply don't add up, and of course it gets kind of boring sometimes when you see this stuff because you when you know what to look for, you kind of end up rolling your eyes and going, oh, here we go again. And some of this stuff does happen. I mean, some of this does happen in real. Organically, I guess we could say. It could be the case in France. This was just an organic act of, fundamentalism and stupidity. We can think they're nice immigration policies for a lot of that. But situations like with Monas, this guy just has too much connection and too much contradiction in his background to be an organic killer, and when you look at these things and you see them on a number of different occasions here or in other countries, you kind of pick up on some of the warning signals that these things may have been controlled.
Yeah, well, I mean, you say it was well known to the authorities and not so well known to the Muslim community, obviously. But I mean, his interviews go back to 2001. It's not like he's just appeared on the radar. I mean, he's been doing this for a long time, getting interviews on ABC in Australia and other outlets and newspapers, and he was well known within the media there. Yeah,
and if the media was interested in getting the opinion of the Australian Muslim community, why would they go to somebody that the Australian Muslim community had no contact with, that had no knowledge of him? I mean, this is not going to the Australian Muslim community, right? This is just finding some guy who's not even a part of that community. His qualifications were non-existent as well.
Well, he's come across as a complete fraud to the genuine Muslim community, because nobody's allowed to call themselves an Ayatollah. Just off the bat, I mean, it's something that as far as I'm aware, they only actually exist in their own countries. I don't think you'd be an Ayatollah anywhere else other than Iran, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, you can't. You can't. So I mean, the question though is that he was calling himself a sheikh too, and a lot of those guys were saying he's not a sheikh. We don't even know who he is, or sheikh, whatever you want to pronounce sheikh.
So, I mean, most of these sheiks or sheikhs, shaky sheiks, have long family traditions going back. You can trace their lineage and stuff, and that's why they're sheikhs. They come from these families or whatever. But I mean, this guy seems like just a guy on his own. He's got no kind of affiliation to anything. Not that the Muslim community knows, and his only affiliation seems to be with ABC television and the Iranian security forces. And apart from that, he's a nobody.
Yeah, and they kept coming back. I mean, these interviews, there wasn't just one interview with ABC. These were a series of interviews. And it flipped all of a sudden. It was at first he was a super liberal preacher, and then all of a sudden he became a fundamentalist, and then he became Sunni all of a sudden. So what's going on with the story here? It changes so much. I guess the guy was just so expendable that they could change these narratives as much as they want. But of course, the average person is not going to know this. The average person who watched CNN and watched the 24-hour reports on some of these news networks are not going to even know to question the narrative to begin with. But if they do, it's hard to find out that this guy had such a contradictory story and a contradictory background.
Yeah, I'm looking at some of the laws that they're using, this incident as justification for. I mean, anyone, including journalists, it says, whistleblowers and bloggers who recklessly disclose information, define recklessly, that relates to a special intelligence operation, define that as well, faces up to 10 years in jail. I mean, any operation can be declared special by an authorized ASIO officer. So, I mean, these guys can just make up any excuse to basically arrest journalists. Anything.
Yeah, and as you said, they've already defined it, which means just whatever we say it is in terms of special intelligence operation. So there's a blank check to arrest journalists and of course whistleblowers as well. And again, as I said, whenever you saw this situation arise in Australia, you only had to wait for about 5 minutes to let it die down, and the reports of the actual attack to die down, and then you knew that there were going to be new laws that were introduced. I mean, this is how it works. Every country does this, and this is the way it worked over here. And of course, that's what came. There was a series of anti-terrorism and surveillance bills that went through in Australia. This is just one of the latest ones, right? We had one round of legislation that went through earlier in the year, and that was called the National Security Legislation Amendment of 2014. And that's the one you're referring to. That's the one that gave the Australian Intelligence Office the authority to arrest journalists and whistleblowers, up to 10 years in jail, actually, for some of this stuff. It gave the intelligence officers the ability to declare anything a special intelligence operation. It gave the intelligence agencies immunity for both criminal and civil liability in a number of different circumstances during the course of an investigation, and it keeps going. It's essentially, I would say, it's a version of the Patriot Act, the Australian version of the Patriot Act, but they already had that. This is, I guess, the Australian version of the NDAA. Maybe we've come so far.
Yeah, well, they're talking about accessing internet networks, and again, it doesn't define what a network is. I mean, you've got a network in your house. Yeah. 2 or 3 computers is a network. So, are they saying they're obviously legally allowed to monitor everybody? Basically, that's all they're saying. This is giving them the justification to monitor everybody's computer.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they will just need to get one warrant, and they can access what they refer to in some of the articles that were discussing the bill. They said it was a limitless number of computers on a computer network. As you said, just 2 computers essentially are a network. So one search warrant allows them to access the whole network. But if you've got many computers on one network, all you need is one warrant for one computer, and then you can access all of them.
Yeah, well, I suppose what we're talking on now, Skype, that's a network.
Yeah, exactly. And I would caution everybody to automatically assume that regardless of whatever bills are passed, that you're already being listened to and that you're already being, surveilled upon. Not
Well,
just...
absolutely. I mean, I've thought that for years, but I think it's like all these buzzwords that they keep looking out for. I always come out with the one that let's all go down the flea market and make a bomb. What does that mean? I mean, if we all fill it with such rubbish, I mean, what can they do? They're already watching us, so we may as well give them something to laugh about. I mean, and waste their time, because we're not saying anything that's wrong.
Yeah, and the idea here, though, is that they're codifying it now. And now when they, not only are they spying on us, and not only are they reading the emails and listening to the conversations and putting that into a network or a database. I did an article on that a while back, and they can actually record the audio, video, and digital data for each person in the country for a very small amount of money. I mean, it's not a very expensive thing to do. We think about nationwide surveillance, and we think that this is some type of massive, very expensive project. But actually, it's not very expensive with the technology that they've got, and the fact that we give it all up to them for free, and the fact that they have these massive supercomputers that can compute all this stuff and store it in a relatively quick and easy and cheap fashion. But when they codify it into law, when you know it's there, when you suspect that they're listening to you is bad enough, but when they tell you that they're listening to you, that's another thing. That's just one step further. That's why we're actually having this so-called debate on torture right now. I mean, not to get too far off the topic right now, but the idea, we had this before. It was a debate on torture. We had the debate on surveillance with the Snowden situation, and I personally think Snowden is a plant, but
I agree with you wholeheartedly. I mentioned that today on my own show.
We had this debate over surveillance and torture, and I have asked people, when have you ever known the American people to win a debate? We never win a debate. The idea is that they're putting this out there because we can see the torture on the screen, and we can say, oh, that's horrible, we don't want to do that. A small portion of the population cares, a small portion of the population supports it, and most people just don't care at all. They couldn't care less what happens. And then the both sides argue back and forth for about 2 weeks, and then it's forgotten. And then we all just assume that America tortures. And this is the same way that it worked in the surveillance question.
Sorry, carry on.
No, it was just, we had the debate over the surveillance. The United States government is listening to your phone calls and reading your emails. It's much worse than that, but this is what's put out. And the American people debate it. Half of them think it should not be done. Half of them, a part of them thinks it should not be done, and then another small part believes that it should be done. And again, everybody else in the middle just doesn't care. They want to go watch Dancing with the Stars, and it's dropped after about 2 weeks. Nobody cares. It's boring. They don't want to stay on the topic. It involves work, if it is true, and then we move on and we assume that we're being surveilled, and that's how it happens. They're letting us know that they're doing it, and we're acquiescing by our silence and our apathy.
Well, absolutely. I mean, why are we even having a debate on torture? It's illegal.
Exactly.
It's a crime against humanity. Why is there's no debate? It shouldn't be happening. And the same goes with surveillance. I mean, ask any of these idiots that, as you say, go watching Dancing with the Stars or X Factor or whatever. Okay, if you think torture's great, wait till it happens to you. Will you agree with it then? If not, you'll be tortured into saying you do.
Well, that's unfortunately a lot of this information that comes out. And again, to get on the Snowden situation, and this stuff was what I would call a limited hangout. It's just putting this information out there. Again, it's much worse than that. I mean, the debate that's going on around torture surfaces around waterboarding and maybe stress positions and light deprivation and stuff like that. It's bad enough. It's horrible stuff. But these guys were actually raping children in front of their parents, and that's on record. And I've actually heard a number of people defend this garbage. Average people, not the Dick Cheney vampires, but the average person, right? Who is actually justifying the raping of children in front of their parents.
Yeah.
And
it's beyond belief how not depraved. I mean, how intellectually remote are these people from reality that's acceptable in any context. It doesn't matter if the parent is the worst terrorist on the planet. It's not the child's fault. You know,
exactly.
It's nothing to do with the child.
But of course, if you criticize the torture program, then you're un-American and you're unpatriotic, and you are I guess providing material material support to terrorism through your compromising of the American national security situation. I've been hearing a lot about this since the recent torture scandal has come out, and of course the American people as a whole are divided between conservative and liberal, and then the overwhelming majority who couldn't care less so long as the television stays on. So I imagine the alleged North Korea hacking scandal was a nightmare for a lot of them to think that their TV and movies might be attacked. So no wonder that America was up in arms for that. But generally it depends. All of this stuff depends. The opinion of the average American depends on who the president is, right? So if I would imagine that Republicans would not support torture if Barack Obama was president, and the liberals would oppose war if George Bush was president. That's generally how it works here. It works very well. Works very well to keep people divided, as they've done with the racial situation over the police brutality. So I just kind of went off on a tangent. Sorry.
No, it doesn't matter. I mean, it's much the same in the UK, although they're all in support of war over there. And terrorism, etc., is worth the torture. Torture justifies keeping us all safe. And I mean, most people in Britain, I'd say, don't give a toss about it. I mean, they've seen it on 24. They've seen I can't remember the cat, Jack, whatever his name is.
Jack Bauer, yeah.
Jack, yeah. I mean, they've seen all that, and they think, oh yeah, this is great. He's a hero. I wish we could all be like him and save the world from people like this guy in Sydney. Which is never going to happen.
Well, I guess I should say, I should give the conservative guys a little bit of credit, because the conservatives are at least consistent. They always support war, and they always support torture. The liberals only support that stuff when a Democrat's in office.
Yeah, it was strange. I was in the Irish Parliament talking to a Green minister, of all things, with a couple of colleagues of mine, and just kept bombarding him with stuff that he didn't have a clue about, until he actually stood up and walked away and said, I can't do this anymore. But that was quite funny. But it turned out that this Green liberal, peace-loving man cheers in the armaments industry. So I mean, they're all at it. It doesn't matter what colour tie they put on. Okay, we'll possibly go to a piece of music and we'll come back. I mean, I listened to your last podcast on GMO and the anarchist thing and the race baiting thing, and I'd mentioned this before. I was talking to Aaron France a few weeks ago, and he was saying how the racism arguments even come into the so-called truth movement, with some people actually going along with it, saying it's all a racist thing, and supporting it, supporting the police and stuff. But my take on it was that the whole race thing's been put out to divert from the fact that the police are killing people. And one statistic which I kind of went, oh, geez, that's quite surprising, was since 9/11 the police had killed more people more Americans than that died in Iraq. And I mean, I think you said in your podcast that, like, pause a little or something to that effect and think about that. I mean, that's a lot of people, and we're only hearing about 3 or 4 of them. We're not hearing about the other 4,966 or whatever. We're only hearing about a minority, and they're all high-profile cases. And today, myself and Paula watched a couple of videos of Michael Brown. Well, allegedly Michael Brown. I mean, it might not have been Michael Brown, but showing him to be kind of some vicious henchman, kicking the crap out of a couple of people. Now, I don't know if that's Michael Brown or not, but purportedly it is. And again, it's almost like, and I'd said this before, it's blaming the victim for their own demise. And you mentioned Eric Garner. and the fact that they tried to blame his underlying health conditions for his death. Well, no, it's the fact that the policeman had his arm around his throat. That's what killed him. It wasn't his asthma, and it wasn't the fact that he was selling untaxed cigarettes that killed him either. But this whole race thing is diverting attention away from the fact that the police, some of the police, not all of them, I'm sure there are many good police officers out there, and I wish they'd just step up to the plate and start arresting the bad ones. But, they're killers. I mean, they're totally out of control, and because they know they're going to get away with it.
Yeah, and as we said with that statistic, with the since 9/11, the American police have killed more Americans than insurgents in Iraq. I mean, we invaded their country. We killed their men, women, and children. We cut off the power. We cut off the water. We destroyed their infrastructure, destroyed most of the things that they knew and cared about. And they still haven't killed as many American citizens as American police in the same amount of time.
Where's the laws to stop that then? Where's the draconian laws to stop American police officers killing civilians instead of the other way around? How many police officers are killed by civilians? I mean, I know there was one killed in Florida this week, and the hypocrisy is there for all to see. 2 police officers killed in was it New York? One Hispanic, one Asian, I think. None of them black, none of them white, funnily enough. But both ethnic, what would be termed ethnic minorities, for want of a better term. But a big fuss about that, and the fact that Bloomberg has blood in his hands and all that for not protecting these officers, and he has to do more. So I mean, obviously we're going to see more draconian laws in New York, even although the police are going out murdering people, when they want to. Yeah,
about 40. That's how many police get killed per year. About 40. That's
the whole of the United States, yeah?
Yeah, the whole of the United States. They try to give you bigger numbers. They try to say something like 60. But they lump in, if a cop has a heart attack in his police cruiser, then they consider that dying in the line of duty. So I've seen this statistic being shared around with a lot of people, which is that every 58 hours a police officer dies in the line of duty. Well, that's bull. That is absolute bull. They give you 58 hours because it sounds like 58 minutes or 58 seconds, right? That's usually how the statistics go. It's actually, like every 3 days or so. But those statistics aren't true. It's less than that because they lump in health problems, like a cop is, sitting at the wheel, taking a nap, and then has a stroke. Well, that's considered dying in the line of duty. Traffic-related accidents are also added into those statistics. So if they hit a sheet of ice and run into a light pole and die, that's considered dying in the line of duty. It's not quite the same as getting shot in the face. So those statistics are warped. But yeah, it's more people die as an electrician than police die every year, right? Being an electrician is more dangerous of a job than being a police officer in terms of how many people lose their lives doing it every year. I think working as a logger is much more dangerous than working as a police officer. So that falls on deaf ears when I continually hear that they're putting their life on the line. Actually, you're putting your life on the line when you get anywhere near them.
Yeah, I mean, look how many people killed on the road every year. I mean, should we just ban cars?
Well,
they're trying to anyway, aren't they? They're trying to get us off the road anyway, so maybe that's coming next. Who knows?
I've actually seen them in South Carolina go to a call and then run into each other on the way to the call.
I wonder if there's a statistic for how many police officers actually shoot other police officers while on duty.
That would be interesting too, because I know that that's happened.
Well, there was a case. I mean, we're getting a little bit off topic. There was a case when I was living in Ireland, and there was 2 armed police officers outside the American embassy, supposedly protecting the place. And they went for a few beers and started a fight outside the embassy. Now, these guys have got pistols in their pockets. They started pointing pistols at each other in the street. And all that happened to them was they were reassigned to somewhere else.
But they're trained, you see. They can have the pistols because they're trained.
Yeah. Well, my police colleague of 31 years was in the Special Protection Unit in London. He told a similar story of bullets going into like the post boxes of recognised diplomatic houses and stuff, purely because the guys were drunk out in the street. And they're lucky they didn't hit anybody, but I mean that's just it happens to go off all the time. You know, it's, so as I say, yeah, I mean it'd be interesting to see how many police officers actually kill each other, whether it's just through stupidity or arguments or whatever. Who knows? Okay, we'll go to a piece of music and we'll come back. And I want to talk about these. You talked a lot about anarchists and so-called anarchists. I'll put anarchists in inverted commas because a lot of them are just, I believe, mindless thugs or either provocateurs, one of the two, because they're certainly not serving any valid cause, and they're actually detrimental to any valid cause. So you have to wonder what they're about. And yeah, I mean, getting back to the race type, well, we've kind of covered that, but we could cover it a little bit more. Yeah, we'll carry on from there. The GMO thing as well, that was what I also wanted to talk about. Okay, so we'll go to a piece of music and we'll come back with that.
I woke up this morning and I turned on the radio. I heard the same old song, so I went outside. People fighting, people living, people dying, and it's oh so much to think about. It's oh so much to worry about, it makes me cry. Need a better perspective, need some time to reflect it, to remember how similar we all are. We all want the same things, a chance to follow our dreams, to raise a family of love and liberty. So don't forget the time we spent. We're not perfect, but we have good intent, and even though we make mistakes, we stand unified. So hold on tight, it's a hell of a fight, keeps you up in the night, but we have to remember we're all on the same side. We're all on the same side. We're all on the same side. Now it's late in the evening and I can't seem to turn off the news, telling me that we're gonna lose, but we've already won. We've got a message and a voice and a song. Now if only we could all just get along, put away the past and pride and leave the worries behind. Need a bit of perspective, need some time to reflect it, to remember how similar we all are. We all want the same thing, a chance to follow our dreams. We are a family of love and liberty. So don't forget the time we spent. We're not perfect, but we have good intent, and even though we make mistakes, we stand unified. So hold on tight, it's a hell of a fight, keeps you up in the night, but we have to remember we're all on the same side. We're all on the same side.
back to Reality Bytes, 22nd of December, a few days to Christmas, ho ho ho, and all that, bah humbug. Michael Garner and Michael Brown. As I mentioned earlier, there's a couple of videos gone out today showing Michael Brown beating the crap out of a couple of people on a couple of different occasions, it appears. But there's no way of knowing if this is actually Michael Brown. It's just a very heavy-set black guy, or dark brown guy, I should say, because, as I say, I've never seen a black guy or a white guy. And obviously this is to make it out like he deserved it. He deserved to be shot down the street unarmed. And again, the same goes for Eric Garner. He deserved to die because he was selling untaxed cigarettes. It's all his fault. If he hadn't been selling untaxed cigarettes, he wouldn't have been murdered. And if he didn't have asthma, well, he might have still been alive. But it's all they're putting the blame for all this. Well, either on they're going down the racist angle, which serves to cause more social unrest, or they're blaming the victim. And it always seems to be the way that whenever anything bad happens, it's the establishment always blame the victims, and they'll blame the Iraqi people for supporting a vicious regime, as if they have a choice, or whatever. But it's we're not at war against the Iraqi people, don't you know? But we just happen to kill a few thousand of them, and a few 100,000 Iraqis. But we're not against the Iraqi people. But they shouldn't be supporting a nasty regime, and it's all their own fault for being in the wrong place at the wrong time, as it were. So this the way this the whole riots, if you want to call them that, and how they've been infiltrated or completely taken over by so-called anarchists or Black Flag or whatever you want to call them, Black Bloc, those types of people who are so brave that they cover their faces and don't want to be seen in case they're recognised possibly as undercover police officers, who knows. But in the London riots in Tottenham, I'm not sure it was the last ones or the previous ones, I was watching this on the BBC, and at the time I was taking loads of photographs of the TV screen and videos, and you could actually see the police officers showing their badges to get through the police lines, and then taking off microphones behind the police lines from some helicopter footage that was up there. Is that what we're seeing with these guys in Missouri? Who, I mean, as you say, what is the point of destroying your own neighbourhood? Where's the logic in that?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously we know that happens a lot. We know that people do, that when these riots occur, that people will go out and just destroy their own neighborhoods, which to me is just absolutely stupid. It just sucks that so many decent people have to suffer the consequences. That you couldn't just take the people that went out and burned their own neighborhoods and let them live in squalor for the rest of their lives. But unfortunately, there's a lot of people there that had nothing to do with that have to live through the consequences. But there are cases, like you mentioned, in some of the London riots, and they happened in Seattle, they happened in California, with the Black Bloc anarchists will come out, which are entirely controlled by intelligence agencies and the police, to go out and start riots and to justify a crackdown by attacking riot police and so forth. And you can see video of them as well going out and punching police and justifying or giving the police the justification to crack down on the activists. And then once the fight, they just walk behind police lines and go off to safety. I don't know in terms of Ferguson. Now, I will say it is questionable that a lot of the areas that went up in flames the second go-round were areas that were under lockdown of the police. Now, that is very questionable. But there were many other areas that went up in flames as well. Now, some of the residents said that most of the people who were involved in the looting weren't from around there. It's hard to tell. It's hard to tell one way or the other. I will say that not all of the anarchists who were supporting the riots, however, were Black Bloc. Not all of them were. A lot of them were just anarchists who have no more sophistication than to understand that burning down your own neighborhood is a bad idea, just because they see any semblance of authority, whether it be government, the convenience store, or whatever, as the enemy. They will support destroying it to just throw a fit. And to me, that's childish. That's very stupid activism. and they ought to be ashamed of themselves for it and for leading other people astray with that stuff. I will also say that the racial issue that was thrown into the mix, I should say, is another way to just divide people. The police, who, by the way, were the people who killed Michael Brown. So it's another reason that the writing is entirely stupid, right? You could look at the video, you could see people throwing or destroying buildings. You could see them yelling at white people as the police stood 50 feet away, a big grin on their face. The police are the enemy here that killed Michael Brown. The police are the oppressors. Why is nobody doing anything to the police? Because the police are there and they're itching for a fight, and nobody does anything.
Well, I mean, again, why not protest outside the police station? Why not take 100,000 people to the local police station and stand outside there? I've said it before many years ago, in fact. Like, you got riots in London. Why are none of these people down at the financial centre? Down there, if they're anti-capitalists, go down to the City of London, protest down there, where the real enemy is, in terms of the banking system, or go down Wall Street and stop them working, stop those employees going into the building, do that.
Yeah, even if you don't have the political sophistication to know that maybe it's the banks, right? Even if you just see, if you're down there at the grassroots level on the ground and you see the police as the pinnacle of your oppression, then yeah, why don't you go to the police station? You know where they're at. They're not around like that. Even when the protest and riot started, the police are there on the street. So the enemy's right there in front of you, but instead you turn around and you burn down your neighbor's house. That's disgusting. And for all the anarchists who wanted to justify that and say that the riots were a good thing, then perhaps if I lose my job and I get angry, or if I get attacked by a cop, then perhaps I'll drive to one of these anarchist house and burn that down. Let's see how I enjoy that.
Well, exactly. I mean, again, that wouldn't make any sense.
Exactly.
It
wouldn't make any sense.
No, and I'm sure it wouldn't make any sense to them either. But they can't see the irony. But I mean, in terms of anarchists, I mean, I don't know what the definition of that is these days, because they seem to, the whole point of anarchy is you don't get told what to do by anybody. You're your own person, blah 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 blah, and yet they have these leaders who they'll follow. Well, I mean, you can't give up one kind of form of oppression for another, and that's all they seem to be doing. But they're told what to do by some guy in a mask. They don't even know who he is.
Yeah, and of course, all of this to me, which if you heard my own radio show, then you know what I'm probably about to say. But it's very unsophisticated. I mean, I'm totally down with the idea of not having government intervention in your personal life and that sort of thing. But whether it's the question of genetically modified foods, or it's the question of I don't know, some other issue, the economy. The anarchists, unfortunately, work against themselves every single time. And just go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that they do work against themselves every time, I mean, whether it is that they're just stupid or not is debatable. But the fact that they do work against themselves every time has to make you wonder what their actual function is. And that's
the point that I've been trying to drive home here. For instance, if you have genetically modified foods, and I think that the left, people on the right, they can both agree that they don't like I'm talking about the informed ones, can both agree that they don't like genetically modified foods, that it's bad for us, that it's bad for the environment, and anarchists can agree with that as well. But the argument that when somebody says, all right, let's ban GMO foods, the argument is no, you can't ban GMO food because that legitimizes the government, or that's a violation of the. And essentially, every single issue you have, they come in and they say, no, you can't do that because that involves government, and we don't want to involve government. Whether it's economics, the free trade garbage that's destroyed the economies of every to it. argument is, oh, you can't think about that because that violates the market, or that will legitimize a government control system. And you find out that in every single instance, or almost every single instance, the anarchists are on the same side as Wall Street, or on the same side as big corporations, and even in some instances on the same side as the government. But if I were in a movement that were constantly on the same side as Wall Street or a major international corporation, question what I was in. And when your issues line up with J.P. Morgan and Chase Manhattan, when your issues line up with Monsanto, then you should question yourself when you have the mutual interest at heart, and your solutions are the same.
I think we're losing you a little bit there, Brandon. I think we'll possibly got a piece of music and call you back. It's breaking up badly. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, okay, we'll get a piece of music and call you back.
Okay.
Okay, cheers. Welcome back. We had a bit of sound issue with Brandon's Skype, but we've got him back loud and clear now, hopefully. You just finished off with what we heard was the anarchists always going against themselves, always being in league with Wall Street, J.P. Morgan, etc. And it put to mind just a funny situation I came across in Edinburgh. Right along the end of Princess Street, which is the main street in Edinburgh, you've got the castle on one side, and there's a little statue, I can't remember if it's Walter Scott or somebody else, opposite one of the 2 5-star hotels in Edinburgh at the time, and they stand right opposite there with a socialist worker, and they're supposed to be, all for, a bit of anarchy, a bit of this, bit of that, but socialist workers, the paper they try and throw out to people, and Scotland's basically the most communist state in Europe now. And I walked past and said, right, guys, what are you protesting for now? And they said, socialist work. I said, but you've got socialism. Like, you may as well go home. And they weren't happy. They weren't happy because they wanted to get rid of a few more newspapers. But it's like, you've got the most communist leader, of the SNP in power now, and you've now got social workers allowed to come into the family home 24 hours a day, any whim they want, and they can take your children off you any time of day. For no reason whatsoever. You might have a pile of dishes in the sink, that's deemed unhealthy, we're having your children. The situation in Scotland now is that you've got a social worker assigned to every newborn child from birth. And they can basically come in your home 24 hours a day and do what they like. So, I mean, I said this to them a few years ago that this was coming. And as I say, they weren't happy, but totally deluded.
Well, I guess they were good Marxists and they wanted perpetual revolution, right?
Yeah, going round and round in circles, yeah. Getting nowhere.
Trotsky, I'd say. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay, the issue of GM foods. Now, in the UK, we're told that, in Europe, in fact, we're told that GM is banned. And yet, we're told, on the other hand, that Spain is the biggest grower of GM crops in Europe. It doesn't make any sense. And we've got all these testing places in the south east of England, Norfolk generally, Norwich around that way. It's nice and flat, and they plant loads of crops there. But again, it's the whole Hegelian dialectic, isn't it? Do we have labelled, or do we ban it? Or better label it. That's the kind of middle of the road, and that's the way we'll go eventually. Whether they do label everything or not is irrelevant. It's almost like it came to mind where they used to say that such and such shampoo had never been tested on animals, but what they never told you that every ingredient in it had.
Yeah.
And is this the way we're going to go with GM? I mean, they're going to have this list of ingredients on the food, but they're not going to say, they might have in small print, this is a genetically modified thing, or whatever, and that'll be it. That's all you're going to get. You're not going to get a big label on the product saying this is genetically modified. Aspartame. Aspartame's, the product of a genetically modified bacteria. I mean, how many products is that in?
Yeah, and even if they do label it, even if they do put the big genetically modified label on it, what difference does that make if all your food has the label on, and you can't afford to buy any food, right? If every bit of food in the grocery store is labeled as genetically modified, that doesn't do anything really.
No,
if you get non-food, so now you have the benefit of knowing that it's GMO food, and you still have to eat it. what it does, it's a solution. I mean, I'm in favor of labeling. I mean, sure, if you want to label, I'll vote for labeling, but I want a ban. I want an entire ban. We'll keep it for controlled testing environments, but no commercial growing, no food products, no animal products, none of that. Nothing for human consumption should be genetically modified. And that goes for materials as well. That's what I'm advocating for.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in the UK, I don't know if it's the same situation in the US, but in the UK, the Parliament there voted not to have GM food in their restaurants in Parliament, and yet they're voting to have open air testing of crops to feed to British people, and yet they won't eat it themselves. Prince Charles has, I think it's 60 farms growing all organic food under polytunnels. He has his own water supply. The people that work in them are dressed in basically hazmat suits, and I had a friend of mine who helped a beef farm, and it was all organic cattle on there, and every one of those cattle went to the House of Lords. The public weren't allowed to buy it. I mean, it's the total hypocrisy, and if these guys are not prepared to eat it, then why should we? Why should we be putting up with it?
Well, Monsanto's own cafeteria there's a sign on the cafeteria door that says this cafeteria proudly serves organic, non-GMO foods.
Well, that's because the staff threatened to go on strike, wasn't it?
Yeah. Oh, did it? I don't know why they.
Yeah,
how it got there.
The staff threatened to go on strike at Monsanto unless they served organic food. They wouldn't eat their own stuff.
But as I said, the labeling is fine. I see a label, but I want to see a ban. And what a labeling situation does, all that does is it throws it back onto the consumer, right? Now it's labeled, and if you want to stop GMO foods, then stop buying it and start buying organic foods. Well, if anybody who's listening to this show has ever tried to go out and eat all organic or non-GMO foods, you know how expensive that can be. And in an economy such as it is unrealistic. It's really largely unrealistic in any kind of economy, but especially this one. And it's a market-based solution, except for the labeling part, I guess. But the market-based solution is also about forcing the victims to shoulder the responsibility for the contaminants that are in their food. And that's not a solution. You want to get rid of genetically modified foods, you ban.
Yeah, well, I could never understand why so-called organic foods were more expensive in the first place, because at the end of the day, the farmer just has to throw them out in the field and let them go on with it, as animals have always done in the past. You don't have to give them any vaccinations, you don't have to give them any, vets treatments or anything like that, unless they get sick. Well, they get sick, that's what happens. But they should be cheaper. And I was actually in Whole Foods, big organic chain in America here the other day there, and just looking about at the prices, it's just horrendous, just because it's got organic on the label. And there was a turkey, it could only have been £5 or £6, this turkey, and because it had organic on it, it was $45.
God.
I mean, there's no way your average hard-working American is going to be able to pay that. No way. And as you say, it's the only way to get rid of that is a ban.
And you also get the solutions too. A lot of again, I don't hate the anarchists, I should say. I mean, I identify with these people with different issues. So I'm not just here to beat up on them, but a lot of the from the anarchists are, well, you can't afford the non-GMO organic food from the store, then produce your own food. Grow your own food, grow a garden, and that's. It comes from people who have a lot of time on their hands, for one thing, or who've never grown, because that's a lot of work. Have you ever grown a garden to provide food?
Yeah. Well, I was fortunate enough to have land in Ireland, and I planted out 1/4 of an acre, and basically it took about 3 years' work to prepare the land, trial and error, planting the stuff. But I mean, once it got going, it was great. I mean, I had too much food, but I mean, it's like, I've always said to people, like, you better store up on food, because, if the shit really hits the fan, it's going to take you a year or 2 years to grow your own garden and get enough out of it to survive on. And that's what it takes. And people think it's easy, and it's not. It takes a lot of work. But the results are, they're good, I have to say, and it was well worth doing. But again, it costs money to start with.
Yeah, and my whole point is, I'm with doing that. If you're able, even if you have the time, energy to put the effort in and to do that, then I encourage it. I think that is a solution, which is, you're not contributing to that system. You're providing good food for yourself and healthy food, and you're not spending money with the big corporations. But in terms of a national solution, like for the United States, for 300 million people, how they are supposed to eat, it's a gimmick. And you can't afford to have gimmicks and just tell people to go out, just grow your own food or shop with your dollars. Those are gimmicks. Those are not solutions on a national scale. They are on an individual scale, and that's something that each individual can do if they're able. But it's not a national solution, and that's kind of what I'm interested in, as well as the individual solutions, as well as the sort of micro level things. But what can we look toward as a real solution, as a demand? If we're going to have some type of mass movement, then we have to have a demand. We can't just go out there and throw a fit and say, we don't like genetically modified foods. And when the question is, well, what do you want in place of it, or how do you want us to get to better foods? If the answer is, I don't know, we haven't thought about that yet, that's not an answer, So,
no. Well, I mean, most people in cities couldn't grow their own food anyway. They're totally dependent on the store. And as you say, what's in the store is all they're going to be able to buy, and you can't buy turkeys at $45. It just doesn't work. Especially 2 or 3 kids, and you try to feed it on a turkey for $45. There goes the budget. What about the veg? He's like, you've no money left. But yeah, I mean, it's the only way is a total. People say, but the price of food would go up. Well, would it? Would it? What would the supermarkets do? What would they do? They'd have to bring the prices down because nobody would be buying stuff. They'd just be buying basics.
Well, you've also got the programs like parity agriculture that we've gotten away from here in the U.S. that we used to have back in the 40s and 50s, but we got away from it, and we went toward the subsidies programs, which really they don't make that much money for farmers. They benefit the major corporations, which get the money through loop, that sort of thing, and taxpayer money to produce the crap that we don't want to eat. But we had something called parity agriculture, which was slightly different, which ensured that the farmers got a decent wage or a decent payment for their crops, and the food prices were actually lower, and it was also better as well. So we could return to that, which I would be a big fan of. And I said when we're talking about demands here, if people who go out and protest and they say, we don't like free trade, and what's your answer? And then, if you don't like something, what's your answer to it? If you can't answer the question, then it's hard to have a mass movement based on we just don't like what's happening, and we don't have any concrete demands for the future. That's not something that I'm generally interested in. In terms of GMOs, I'm entirely for a ban and parity agriculture for organic foods, non-GMO foods, which should be banned.
Yeah. Well, I mean, another aspect of this is that, like over in the UK, particularly, I don't know what it's like here, but I do, because we've got a Walgreens opening along the road there, and there's one just across the street. So there's going to be 2 of them, one on each corner. But in the UK, it's either Tesco's, Asda, which is Walmart. That's the big 2. And you'll get people in small towns saying, they're building the Tesco's up the road, that's going to kill the high street. I'm like, well, don't use it.
Right.
I mean, if nobody went to that store the day it opened, it would be shut within 2 weeks. You just don't use it. That's the answer.
Yeah, I'm going on 15 years of being Walmart free. I haven't spent money in Walmart in almost 15 years, and of course I go in there with other people as they do their shopping, and I've seen people actually go in Walmart and complain about how Walmart is. They're in Walmart with a cart full of stuff. If you hadn't shopped here to begin with, it wouldn't be here. You'd still have the old stores.
Well, yeah, I admit I've been in Walmart, I think, once, and bought a kettle. That was it. But that was it. But yeah, I mean, I'm walking the Walmart, and it's actually a poorer version of Asda, which is owned by the same people in the UK, and but it's the same kind of psychology used. You got your 2-for-1s, you got this free stuff and all the rest of it, and the same colour scheme. It's all green, it's all nice and environmentally friendly, and but everything in the shop's made in China. It's like these eco bags, these canvas bags. I mean, I've not seen one yet that doesn't have a made in China label on it. Made in sweatshops in China, but that's environmentally friendly.
Oh yeah, I've seen the frying pans that they sell, the frying pans, the environmentally friendly frying pans, and the health conscious frying pans that are made with aluminum.
Yeah, well, I mean,
the aluminum.
Teflon's got fluoride in it, so I mean, there you go. You got to get drugs somehow. Where does that leave us? Okay, moving on from GMOs. The SPLC, the Southern Property Law Centre, and your article on that, which I think you just posted, was it the last couple of days? I mean, the name would imply, like many of these organisations' names, the World Health Organization, the United Nations, they all imply this big benevolent thing, and the Southern Property Law Centre, it sounds like it's there for the people, the Southern Property Law Centre, sorry, it's there for the people, it's there for poor people, and it's anything but. It's this very sinister organisation, and I mean most people in the UK would know about it very much, and I admittedly don't know much about it myself, but maybe you could take us through where this organisation came from and what they're up to now with basically banning hate music or heavily influencing, shall we say, sites which sell music, and they're basically dictating what can and cannot be bought.
Yeah, well, the Southern Poverty Law Center was an organization that was started in the 60s under the guise of human rights to kind of piggyback on the civil rights movement here in the U.S., but it's linked to organizations like the ADL, and essentially what it does, it's an organization that not only consistently race baits, always there to provide racial division, but it's all connected with law enforcement. And it fearmongers over gun owners. I mean, if you're a gun owner, the SPLC will essentially call you a potential terrorist. They've been given this mantle of being an organization that knows all about domestic terrorism, racism, and hatred. Right? They're supposed to be the I guess the country's leading experts on this. Of course, all they are is a non-governmental organization that takes money from Soros, from what I understand, but they're infiltrating virtually every major police department in the United States. They are closely connected with the FBI. That's written on their own website. And there was a report that came out in Missouri a few years ago called the MIAC report, the Missouri Intelligence Analysis. Forgot what the C stands for. Committee, maybe. I don't remember what it stands for, but it deemed people who were libertarians, who were supporters of Ron Paul or Chuck Baldwin, or people who were constitutionalists and that sort of thing, as potential domestic terrorists. And it even considered people who had apocalyptic religious beliefs. And that could be, most Christians, especially in the South, who have apocalyptic religious beliefs, as domestic terrorists. And they've been in a number of reports with the FBI and with police departments that paint people who are gun owners or militia movements. They paint a lot of the militias as hate groups, as potential domestic terrorists and that sort of thing. So that's the kind of simplistic version of what the SPLC is, and they consistently will come out with reports that attack the militias, attack constitutionalists, attack libertarians, attack anybody who maybe question the system. They've done hit pieces on other alternative media people as well, and saying that they were potential domestic terrorists. But the most recent thing is that they have scoured the internet and found what they call hate music. This is racist rock music. In fact, I think they call it white power rock. And they're concerned with racist music. They don't really care about all the, anti-white just rap music that's out there. They're only after the white power rock. But they found a bunch of songs, and if you look at the lyrics to the songs, I'm always hesitant to call something, after I hear 3 or 4 lines of a song to make a determination about it. But from what I see of the songs and songs, and it really sounds pretty racist. I mean, it sounds pretty anti-Semitic and all that kind of stuff. But regardless, this we supposedly have a amendment here where people are be able to say what they want to say, however they want to say it. The SPLC gets a hold of this, and it lobbied iTunes and Amazon and Spotify to take the music off. And of course, iTunes complied, and the Amazon apparently is not moving fast enough for the SPLCs. They'll be throwing a fit over that. The question, so a lot of stuff has been removed, and the question is, this wasn't removed by force of law. True enough, it was removed by a corporation. But the fact is, the SPLC does this repeatedly, right? They go after people's First Amendment rights. Whether you like the lyrics of the song, whether you like the sentiment of the songs, that's irrelevant. The First Amendment is there to protect popular speech, not popular speech. If it was popular, it wouldn't need to be protected. So the SPLC has consistently got a reputation for going around and trying to ban a lot of different types of free speech, all across the country in its history. The SPLC, I should mention too, in some of its various aspects, has also been linked to a lot of the hate groups that it actually claims that it's trying to. And this essentially what they do is they will go in. They say they're infiltrating, but in a lot of instances they actually create these groups of racists, of white power groups, and that sort of thing. And then the groups that they've created go out and do some outrageous act, or they even commit a crime. It's used as the justification to crack down on other groups who maybe haven't committed that act or haven't committed that crime, but it's justified based on what the group that the SPLC committed. And this is something that's been going on for a number of years. Had involvement with the Oklahoma City bombing as well. They were really involved with that. So that's sort of the, in a nutshell, version of the SPLC.
Yeah, well, it's funny, like you say that they'll be involved with these groups that go out and commit outrageous act, and then everybody else is punished. Well, that's the Soviet system, isn't it? Collective punishment, regardless of whether you've actually done anything wrong or not. Yeah, you're kind of lumped in with that whole group, and you suffer the consequences, although you knew better than to act in such an outrageous way in the first place. Again, it goes back to your notion of the anarchists just going out and destroying their own places and bringing about the system that they so despise, if you like. These characters, you say that they're linked with the FBI and people like that. Well, why would anybody take any notice of them? Why would Amazon, iTunes, or any of these corporations, have anything to do with them? You would think if Amazon or iTunes or any were reputable organisations, they'd just get together and say, let's just ignore this, and it would go nowhere.
Well, because they come across as a civil rights organization, as an anti-racist organization. Remember, one of the biggest hits that they can throw at people is the race card, right? If you disagree with the Southern poverty, or you are a racist and an anti-right, and that's the way they present things. And I would imagine that iTunes and Amazon didn't just ignore them, because I would imagine that the people at the higher levels of iTunes and Amazon would know the connections that the SPLC has to the FBI, but also SPLC is pretty loud. They get pretty loud when it comes to some of their little silly campaigns, and they're very influential, not only in public relations but in the law enforcement community as well. They just help author a report with the FBI that really focused with the direction that Missouri law enforcement was going. So, I mean, they're a pretty powerful group. And again, as I said, they're linked to DL, which is an even more powerful organization. So they carry a lot of weight whenever they make these announcements.
Well, I mean, the ADL, for people listening in the UK, what's that stand for?
Defamation.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, we've got something called the EDL in Britain, the English Defence League, and basically they're without doubt backed by the intelligence services, and their sole purpose is to go out and cause kind of racial hatred. They're a kind of newer, modern, more sophisticated version of the old National Front in Britain, and basically the same characters, the skinheads and all the rest of it, and they go out and they'll walk through Muslim neighbourhoods waving English flags and all that as if that means anything these days. Or Union Jacks, which is one that always got me. The wave Union Jacks, and they seem to think that that's an English flag, when most of that flag is actually Scottish. But they don't quite get that, and they hate Scottish people as well. So I don't understand them at all, and I don't think they actually understand themselves.
Why would they let facts get in the way?
Yeah, of a good story. Yeah. You mentioned, I can't remember which story it was, and we're kind of talking along the same lines in terms of what we've discussed before with the racism and all the rest of it. White privilege, this notion that white people have kind of never had it so good. I mean, Thatcher back in the day said that Britons had never had it so good, and at that time it was predominantly a white country. And I was a young lad, just left school. I think it was 1979. I left school the month that Thatcher came to power, and it's never got any better. And back then she said we'd never had it so good, and I think it was on £13 a week. That was my benefits. There were no jobs, and basically you were just living day to day, and that was supposed to be the good times. So as far as white privilege goes, I've never known it. I've never ever seen it. And I mean, you can walk through Britain nowadays, and you'll see just as many wealthy African people, Asian people, probably more so, to be honest, than you'll see wealthy white people walking the streets. It's just the whole thing's nonsense. And again, it's this divide and conquer thing, isn't it? The divide and rule, which is something the British Empire has been very, very good at, and I suppose they're carrying it on in America.
Yeah, they are, and this whole white privilege meme was put through by I mockingly call them social warriors. White liberals that have all kinds of white guilt left over from their education, universities, and propaganda education system. But most of this kind of garbage comes from the university, will come. Soros-driven organizations and stuff, and in terms of the catchy phrases, but this idea of white privilege, not 1963 America, right? Was there white privilege in 1963? Yeah, there was, but this is 2014, and this has been a myth for a long, long time. This white privilege myth, the idea that I saw people saying that vastly more black people are killed by police every year than white people. Well, the statistics do show that more black people have been killed by police, but the fact is that not as much as you would think. Right? The statistics were being repeated. There were 21 more times more likely to be killed by police, and it's 3 times, and that is a higher rate, of course, but if you want to really play the statistics game, I don't think that's going to come out in the favor of the social justice warriors, because there's some other statistics at play. But the idea of white privilege is out there to do a couple things. It is, you've got a country of 300 million people who have seen 5,000 Americans killed by police, and this is white people, black people, Hispanic, it doesn't matter, women, doesn't matter. And when people finally start to have enough, the answer provided by the system is that the police are killing people. The problem is white people. that's the way it's being presented. And you get minorities screaming about white privilege, left and right, and being diverted off of the real issue. And then you get white people who are finally getting sick of being blamed for every evil in the world, who come around to, frankly, hate the minorities who are protesting, right? And then they end up hating one another. This is counterinsurgency strategy. This is what some of the things that I've written about in Iraq, where there were this unified resistance against the United States whenever we invaded. And quite frankly, we were getting our ass kicked over in Iraq. And we brought in John Negroponte from his Central American fame with death squads down there. And he came in and he formed death squads to go in, Sunni death squads to attack Shiites, and then Shiite death squads to attack Sunnis. And eventually they got to the point where they were fighting one another and ignoring the Americans. And it was a war between Sunnis and Shiites, which is why there's still so much conflict between the two today. And what it did was allow the United States to walk in and remain in the country and impose the power structure that it needed to impose, and it broke the resistance. And that's what's being done here. It's separating people by race, people who are affected equally by race, and eliminating any type of uniformed opposition.
Yeah, I mentioned this to Alan Franz. He was talking about this whole issue again, and I said that I've said it a few times. I will believe this race thing is actually being accepted by both sides, or how many other sides there are, and when they're all on the streets together protesting the death of somebody. We see how many white people are out protesting the shooting of Michael Brown or the death of Eric Garner. It seems like why aren't there just as many white people out protesting that as there are black people? It could be them next. They don't have to be black. I mean, as you say, 5,000 people killed. How many of them are white?
Yeah, a large number of them. And the Cliven, I don't know if you remember the Cliven Bundy situation. I personally don't think Bundy had any legal justification for doing what he did. It was the guy out in Nevada who had a ranch, claiming that the land management was trying to take over his ranch. And I looked into that, and that really wasn't true. He didn't have any legal claims to that. But regardless, he got portrayed as a victim in the media on Fox News, right? The left wingers on MSNBC and stuff like that portrayed him as like a domestic terrorist. But on Fox News, he was a hero, right? Just this older white guy who was a hero, and the conservatives were all about Cliven Bundy, right? They were all about him standing up to the federal government, essentially an armed resistance, and it was great. But when people of another race do that, then all of a sudden they're thugs, and then they're criminals. And this is the way else, if it's tribal, unfortunately, and again it works.
Yeah, well, again, the only thing that's going to stop that is when all the tribes get together and say we're not having it. It doesn't matter if you kill somebody who's Hispanic. It doesn't matter if you kill somebody who's white, black, Asian. It doesn't matter. We're all in this together, to use that terrible phrase. But we are all in it together. I mean, as you say, it's not just African Americans. It's not just Asians. It's not just Hispanics who are suffering the consequences of government oppression. It's all of us. And until all these groups actually realise that and get together, which is the big fear that the state has, that we all get together, and that's why they do these divide and conquer tactics, then we're never going to get anywhere.
Yeah, and I would also ask another question, though. I mean, I keep coming back to the statistic, 5,000 Americans in the last 10 years. And how many times did CNN or Fox or MSNBC give you coverage of those 5,000 Americans, right? You could find it in the local newspapers or the local media outlets, and you'd see it all over the alternative media, but Fox, CNN, MSNBC, they were largely silent. Why all of a sudden did they bring the Michael Brown situation for 20 hours, 7 days a week, nonstop coverage, sending crews down to cover the issue, and then right on the back of it, they followed the Eric Garner case. And these cases should have been covered. I'm not saying they shouldn't be covered, but why would a media apparatus all of a sudden start covering these issues when they never did before. And we know that the mainstream media is controlled by, 5 major corporations. Do you think that the media, that 5 major corporations are covering this because they care about black people or because they care about average American freedoms? Of course.
Absolutely not. any more than the Times of London is, or the Independent, or the Telegraph, or the Guardian.
But it got everybody all upset, though, all divided. Nobody's angry at the police anymore. And in fact, now that the 2 cops got shot in New York, it's a national tragedy.
Yeah, and there was another case which I'd talked about last week, where the police officers, I think it was in New York actually, had gone out, and the lady was caught stealing eggs, and all of a sudden she got 2 truckloads of food delivered to her house by the local police station. Now, I mean, I don't know anybody that can actually store 2 truckloads of food. Never mind any police station that's going to do that without having an ulterior motive. and it just, as I say, it comes on the back. And she was a black lady, of course. It comes on the back of these killings of black people, and then all of a sudden, the police are portrayed in an angelic kind of light. It's so obvious.
Yeah, the LAPD, I think, or maybe it was the Houston. Well, one of the major police departments, I saw a propaganda video from them on their homeless outreach team. They've got a homeless outreach team now. It's a guy on a bike. And all it is really is propaganda, it's public relations. That's all it is. And, the NYPD, I'm certainly not going to condone, executing 2 guys in a car, but the NYPD might not be the most popular thing to say right now, but is one of the most disgusting, corrupt, oppressive, violent police organizations in the country. And, they are the worst of the worst. I think maybe Chicago could only be running a close second to the NYPD. It's the worst. They stop people. We were talking before the show about stop and frisk, which has been a policy in New York for years. The police say the mayor is not supporting the police. My God, what else does he have to give them? Does he have to give them an executive order that says that they're officially allowed to kill American citizens with impunity?
Well, I was going to say all he needs to give them now is a license to kill. That's it. Well, they've nearly got it, haven't they? I mean, they get offered it, so it's the same thing, really. Okay, we've got a couple of minutes over time. You're on UCY TV, and less than an hour now. What are you talking about tonight?
Well, tonight is actually a rebroadcast. It's an interview that I recorded with Mimi Al-Laham, that people might know as Syrian Girl. And she came on the show for an hour. We just discussed the situation in Syria and the history and a bunch of other issues that I guess most people don't usually ask her when she does interviews. So it's a pretty good show, and I encourage people to check it out.
Okay, well, if people can't get it tonight, I'll stick it on the site tomorrow, and they can have a listen then.
Okay, I appreciate it.
Okay, no problem. Okay, you'll come on again next month, maybe?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, great. Okay, thanks very much for your time, Brandon, and you've got the night off, I guess. Enjoy it.
All right.
Enjoy it.
Thanks for having me on.